Jos Verstappen blasts the FIA for punishing Max, Liam is in trouble for giving Sergio the finger, and Horner prints out data to try and prove Max's innocence. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get into the latest F1 news. Ferrari were the team to beat in Mexico, with Carlos Sainz claiming a commanding victory in the SF24. As Ferrari inch closer to McLaren in the constructors' standings, Charles Leclerc is also hopeful of passing Norris in the Drivers' Championship. The Mexico GP confirmed that Ferrari's COTA victory was a sign of things to come. Following the SF24's latest upgrades, the Maranello-produced car is dictating the pace. To be clear, McLaren are still a significant threat to the Scuderia. Norris pressured Leclerc into a mistake before making notable progress on Sainz in the final laps. Regardless, Leclerc and teammate Sainz have a race-winning car at their disposal. Speaking after his Mexico podium, Leclerc responded to a question about his prospects in the drivers' standings. "I welcome Max being as aggressive to Lando as possible," he said in the FIA press conference. "Because it helps me. At least it gives me chances to be closer to Lando in the Drivers' Championship because it's still a fight. If anything, it's more a fight, Lando and myself, than with Max that has quite a lot of advantages in points. On my side, I don't think about the Drivers' Championship realistically. I'll just try and do the best possible end of the season, and then we'll do the math at the end of the season." Leclerc is only 24 points behind Norris in the standings, with the Briton himself only 47 points away from Verstappen. The margin for error has become smaller and smaller throughout the 2024 season. With 2 of the remaining 4 race weekends to feature sprint races, plenty of points are still up for grabs. Ferrari are in a very strong position, both in terms of absolute performance and in the championship. Given that McLaren and Red Bull have introduced upgrades more recently than Fred Vasseur's team, the SF24 will likely be the benchmark for the rest of 2024. Williams driver Franco Colapinto has dismissed rumors he is in the frame for a seat at Red Bull's RB Formula One team, suggesting he will be on the sidelines in 2025. Colapinto wowed the F1 paddock with his strong performances and calm attitude as a mid-season replacement for Logan Sargent at Williams. In his 5 races thus far, the Argentinian has scored 5 points and never finished lower than 12th, with another combative display at Sunday's Mexico Grand Prix going unrewarded. There is no room for Colapinto as a regular driver at Williams next year, with the team having already signed Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, who won Sunday's Grand Prix, to slot in alongside Alex Albon. But the 21-year-old's form has turned enough heads for him to be considered at Sauber and at Red Bull, which may have a slot at its sister RB team. But while there have been casual talks between Williams and Red Bull, with Williams boss James Vowles willing to loan his reserve driver out, Colapinto has dismissed suggestions he could be on the F1 grid next year. "No, at the moment, I don't understand much of what they are talking about. I don't know where it came from," Colapinto told F1 TV. "I don't have any seat for next year, and at the moment, I'm not racing Formula One. I'm probably going to be racing somewhere else. So look, it's going to be maybe a year that I'm not going to be here, but I hope to be showing that I deserve a seat here enough to come back in 26 or 27. It is my goal, and it's why I'm doing what I can race after race. That's why, after qualifying, I was disappointed with the result, and just trying to do my best session after session to try and show I deserve to be here." While Red Bull is understood to have some interest in Colapinto, driver advisor Helmut Marko suggested the team is not keen on taking outside drivers on loan when it has its own junior program, with F2 frontrunner Isaac Hajar also waiting in the wings. The problem with him is that he has a long-term contract with Williams, the Austrian told the Kleine Zeitung. Taking him on loan is not interesting for any team. You do not want to train a driver for another team. Vowles has reiterated he feels Colapinto deserves a place in F1, and the squad is aiming to help him secure a spot. "I think in all of these things at the moment, let's start with the basics," Vowles told the post-race F1 show. "He has earned his place on the grid, and what we want to help with is finding him a place in that regard. What it looks like I can't tell you at the moment because A, it's very sensitive, and B, there's really not a lot to discuss right now." Liam Lawson has apologized to Sergio Perez for showing him the middle finger during their intense battle in Formula One's Mexico Grand Prix. The New Zealander came to blows with his rival at turn 4 on lap 19, where, after being pushed wide as the Red Bull attempted an overtake, he kept his foot in, and the pair then collided at the following right-hander. Perez's car suffered damage to its floor edge and side pod, which the team reckoned cost him around 65 points of downforce. While the Mexican managed to stay ahead for the rest of the lap, he eventually lost out as the RB breezed past him on the main straight. In his frustration at the situation, Lawson showed Perez the finger as he overtook, a moment that was captured on television. Reflecting on that behavior afterwards, Lawson said it was born out of frustration, but admitted it was something that he should not have done. "It's obviously one of those in-the-moment things," he explained. "He spent half the lap blocking me, trying to ruin my race, so I was upset. But it's not an excuse, I shouldn't have done it, and I apologize for that." Lawson's actions, both in being aggressive with Perez and then showing him the finger, did not impress Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko. Marko told ORF, "It was an unnecessary collision, where I see Lawson as being more to blame." Asked if it was good that Lawson got his elbows out, at least, Marko replied, "If it had been someone else, yes, but not the sister team." Lawson himself conceded that it probably was not ideal how things played out with Perez. "I don't think that's what Helmut likes," he said. "It's not my character, not something you should be doing." Perez laid the blame firmly on Lawson's shoulders for their clash at Turn 5, suggesting that the RB driver could have easily avoided the accident. However, Lawson saw things differently and reckoned that he had been left with nowhere to go. "I left him space into Turn 4 and was coming in very, very late," he said. "Honestly, I tried to give him space. He drove me off the track and then he didn't give me space since Turn 5. So, it's unfortunate about the tension, but I don't know where he wants me to go." Jos Verstappen, the father of Max Verstappen, fears the FIA risk having the appearance of a conflict of interest due to their selection of stewards on an F1 race weekend. It comes after his son, the Red Bull driver and reigning three-time world champion, was hit with two separate 10-second penalties in Sunday's Mexican Grand Prix. Red Bull star Verstappen was forced to serve a time penalty totaling 20 seconds after two separate incidents with McLaren driver and F1 2024 rival Lando Norris at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. The first incident on lap 10 saw Verstappen edge Norris off the circuit as the McLaren driver tried to pass him around the outside of Turn 4. The second came just a few corners later, when Verstappen launched an aggressive move down Norris's inside at the fast Turn 7, with both drivers taking to the runoff area and the Red Bull rejoining ahead. Verstappen was forced to sit stationary for 20 seconds during his pit stop and ultimately came home 6th, his joint worst classified result of the F1 2024 season. Norris, meanwhile, finished second to the race-winning Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, reducing Verstappen's world championship lead to 47 points with 4 rounds remaining. Speaking to Dutch publication De Telegraaf, Mr. Verstappen claimed the FIA should take a good look at their stewards' panels, suggesting some stewards could have more sympathy for particular competitors. He said, "Norris may now be thinking even more. I have to be careful in battle with Verstappen." If you look at Sunday's actions, Max's second moment may have been a bit too much, but he is letting this get over him. You can start talking about it for a very long time, but it makes no difference anyway. Max has to drive the way he wants. He has to do this because the car is not good enough, and he is doing everything he can to win the title. But Max is not going to change his driving style because there were a couple of stewards present now who don't like him anyway. The FIA should take a good look at the staffing of the stewards, who they put there, and whether there is no appearance of a conflict of interest. From former drivers, for example, who have more sympathy for certain drivers or teams. De Telegraaf claimed that Mr. Verstappen is believed to be referring to Johnny Herbert, the former British F1 racer and Sky F1 television pundit, and Tim Mayer, the son of the late McLaren co-founder Teddy Mayer. Herbert and Mayer made up half of the 4-man FIA stewards panel over the Mexican Grand Prix weekend, with Loic Backlin and Alfonso Oros Trigueros also on duty. The clashes between Verstappen and Norris in Mexico came 7 days after the latter was hit with a 5-second penalty for passing Verstappen off the track in the closing laps of the United States GP in Austin, Texas. McLaren saw an appeal against Norris's US GP penalty rejected on Friday at the Mexican Grand Prix. Verstappen Sr. has been a vocal critic of Red Bull's performances in recent months, with the World Championship leader without a race victory since the Spanish Grand Prix on June 23rd. A run of 10 races representing his longest barren stretch since the 2020 season. Verstappen's teammate Sergio Perez, finishing last of the classified runners at his home race in 17th place, having been eliminated from the first stage of qualifying on Saturday at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. And Verstappen Sr. claimed that Red Bull's lack of pace is his son's biggest concern ahead of the final 4 rounds in Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi as he seeks to secure a 4th consecutive world championship. He added, "As far as Max is concerned, the most important thing is that the basis, the car, is not good." You could see that in his teammates' performance. Even Haas was faster than Red Bull in the race. F1 driving standards have come under the microscope over the last 2 races, with governing body the FIA set to present a revised form of the sport's racing guidelines to the drivers at next month's Qatar Grand Prix. Mr. Verstappen feels the implementation of gravel traps at various hotspots would stop drivers taking to runoff areas in wheel-to-wheel situations on track. He said, "They are now asking a bit for it themselves. There are so many huge run-out lanes on many circuits, so as a driver you then also have the space to drive along the track. A gravel tray in that spot would make a big difference." Christian Horner headed into his post-race media session armed with GPS data to illustrate his claim that Lando Norris dive-bombed Max Verstappen and wouldn't have made the corner. For the 2nd race running, Verstappen and Norris clashed as they fought for position, but this time it was the Dutchman who was penalized in Mexico. Running 2nd and 3rd behind Carlos Sainz, Norris challenged Verstappen around the outside of Turn 4, but was forced off the track by the Red Bull driver. He returned to the track ahead of Verstappen, and in a continuation of the apex debate, the stewards handed Verstappen a 10-second penalty for forcing Norris off the track. 3 corners later, they were at it again. This time, Verstappen made a lunge into Turn 7 and forced them both off the track, even though there was a wall just meters away from the runoff. Verstappen took 2nd back in that tussle, but the stewards ruled he had left the track and gained an advantage and gave him another 10-second penalty. He finished the Grand Prix in 6th place while Norris was P2, taking 10 points out of Verstappen's lead in the Drivers' Championship. Horner, who went into his media briefing with GPS data from Norris's McLaren, claims the Briton dive-bombed his driver around the outside by braking later than usual to win the apex debate by getting his nose ahead to claim Verstappen had to give him room. "First of all, I think it was very harsh to give 2 10-second penalties," he told the media, including PlanetF1.com. "I think there's something more fundamental. I mean, obviously there's been a reaction to last weekend. I think it's very important for the drivers' stewards and the drivers to sit down. Because if I show you on the GPS, this is on the rundown to Turn 4. This is actually Lando versus Lando. In Lando's fastest lap of the Grand Prix, the point that he's braking for Turn 4 and then obviously executing the corner. On the lap, there's the incident with Max. He is 15 kilometers an hour faster and later on the brakes than his fastest lap of the Grand Prix. He wouldn't have made the corner, he would have run off track. You can see from his onboard steering. Of course, at this point in the race, he's got probably 80 kilo or more fuel than at the point that he's done his fastest lap. So I think we're in danger of. It used to be a reward of the bravest to go around the outside. I think we're in danger of flipping the overtaking laws upside down, where drivers will just try to get their nose ahead at the apex and then claim that they have to be given room on the exit. You can see quite clearly, he's effectively come off the brakes, gone in super late to try and win that argument, as far as the way these regulations are written, and then at that point, you're penalized. Verstappen and Norris's latest clash came just days after the drivers met during their Mexican Grand Prix drivers briefing with the rules of engagement when it comes to attacking and defending one of the hot topics. It was decided that new guidelines need to be outlined, and those could be in play at the Qatar Grand Prix. Horner, though, believes the rules should be simplified, not compounded, by stating the driver on the inside line has the corner. I just think we're overcomplicating things, and when you have to revert to an instruction manual of an overtake. I mean, the racing principles for years have been if you have the inside line, you dictate the corner, he said. And I think the way the guidelines have evolved is encouraging a driver to have his nose ahead at the apex, irrelevant of whether you're going to make the corner, because you can clearly see on the overlay of those 2 laps that Lando is hung out there to get that advantage. So it's something that just needs to be, I think, tidied up so that everybody knows what is acceptable between the end of the season. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a mess at the upcoming races. Asked if F1 could be in for a serious incident if something isn't done, such as a guy dies, Horner replied, "I wouldn't go that far. It just changes the principle that used to be the advantage was to have the inside line. The advantage will be to have the outside line and just brake later and claim foul. So I think we just have to be very careful. The laws of physics would not have enabled Lando with the weight of the car, and look at the onboard, he wouldn't have made the corner. But I fear that we're overcomplicating the principles of going racing, trying to stipulate who's ahead at what point. The inside line historically has always had priority because it dictates the corner. Christian Horner won't request a right to review. Despite the GPS data in his hands, Horner insisted Red Bull will not follow McLaren in requesting a right to review the penalties. McLaren did that after Austin, but it was rejected as their request didn't meet the criteria. We won't activate a right of review on this, he said. I think the most important thing is to address what is the way to go racing going forward. I'm not sure that it's clear to the drivers or certain aspects of it that you've just got to have your nose ahead at the apex point, which means that you're going to do this. You're going to come off the brakes and carry speed to get to that point to say, I'm ahead of that at that point in time, even though you wouldn't have made the pass. He added, it's frustrating in that you don't want to have to consult a rule book on every single overtake or defense. And you know, all of these guys have grown up doing a lot of racing and understand the principles of that. I think it's just important that we don't over-regulate to a point where you encourage a behavior that is not within the guidelines and the principles of racing. Down another estimated $8 million after being overhauled by Ferrari in the team's standings, Ralf Schumacher believes Red Bull will now decide to drop Sergio Perez. And he believes it could even happen before the end of the season. Having already labeled his F1 2024 campaign a terrible season as he struggles to reach the top 6, never mind the podium, Perez's hopes of putting the rumors about his future to rest with a strong result at his home race in Mexico were undone in Saturday's qualifying. Sorely lacking pace and blaming his RB20's brakes, the Mexican driver qualified down in 18th place and cut a dejected figure after his Q1 exit. It's obviously very disappointing, he said. If there's a Grand Prix that I want to do really well, it's this one. Alas, his efforts to recover on the Sunday were blighted by contact with his potential Red Bull replacement, Liam Lawson, as the two tangled on lap 18. Perez's car suffered floor damage, and while he did complete the Grand Prix, he was 17th and last. But while Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko says he won't judge the Mexican driver's Grand Prix performance given his car lost about 60 points of downforce, Schumacher believes this has to be the end of the road for Perez. He reckons he may not even be in the car come December's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Next year, he won't drive a single meter in the car anyway, I'm pretty sure of that. I don't even think he'll finish the season, Schumacher told Sky Deutschland. Red Bull will make a decision after this weekend. There's no point in it all anymore for either side, not even for Perez. The poor man is under so much pressure, he's not going home beaming with joy. This is supposed to be fun. And above all, financially, this is a disaster for the team, not just for the mechanics. If you want to change something against Ferrari now, you have to change something quickly. Red Bull trail Ferrari after the Mexican Grand Prix, the Scuderia's two-car podium seeing them leap to a 25-point lead in the battle for second in the Constructors' Championship. McLaren are first, 29 points ahead of Ferrari. However, contrary to Schumacher's opinion, Red Bull team boss Christian Horner once again stood by Perez when he spoke to the media, including PlanetF1.com on Friday in Mexico. Checo is our driver, he insisted. He's contracted for 2025, he's competitive, he's hungry. He's not happy with where he currently is. As a team, we're doing our very best to support him. Thanks for watching.